Okay, this lecture is about critical reading, and as a reading specialist, this is one of the things that I'm very passionate about. So I will try to control my enthusiasm and teach you a couple of techniques that I've learned that might help you in your college reading. Okay, first of all, I wanted to talk about some of the myths about reading that I've heard over the years. First of all, I've heard a lot of people say that they're cheating if they don't read every single word in the text. And of course, you don't have to. In fact, I know one friend who, even when she's just pleasure reading, she reads the very end of the book first, because if it's not a happy ending, she doesn't want to read it. So you have the power and the authority to read however you want. And if you don't need to read every word, then you don't have to. Another myth that I've heard before is that um, if I read too quickly, I'm not going to understand what I read. Again, it's kind of related to number one, but if you're just skimming and scanning for information, of course, it's okay to read quickly. Um, and comprehension is something that really is dependent upon what your purpose is. So let's say if you're looking at a train schedule and you are looking for one particular piece of information, of course you're going to skim through to exactly what you're looking for, find out exactly what you need, and forget the rest. The third thing I've heard is that good readers understand everything after one reading. Um, I've struggled with this as a reader myself because when I was younger, I thought, okay, if I read a book once, I'm not going to read that book again. And as an adult, I've realized that not only just with pleasure reading, it can be so amazing to read a book 2 or 3 times. You catch so many different things that you did not see or understand at the first reading. And especially with critical reading, it's okay to go back and read things again, or or go back and say, you know, I didn't understand that one particular paragraph. I'm going to go back and read it again and see if I can get some more meaning from that paragraph. And I've also heard some people say that they will never be good readers because they just weren't born a good reader. And I always tell my reading students that reading is just like playing basketball. You have to practice in order to get better at it. So if you want to be a good reader, the easy answer is to just practice reading. Um, I've also heard a lot of students say, well, reading is all about just memorizing the facts or recalling information, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about this in depth in the next few slides. But reading is way, way more complex than just recalling facts. And the last one's kind of interesting. My opinion about a book doesn't matter. I remember as a young child feeling like it wasn't so much what I thought about a book, it was what I could regurgitate back about that book. And now, as a reading specialist, I realize that um, reading is actually a dialogue, and what you bring to the reading situation is 50% of the reading situation is brought to the table by you. So what you think, what you know about a topic, what you have experienced, all of those things come into play when you read. So now that we've talked about some myths, let's talk about how you read. Because how you read depends on why you are reading. So here's a few different ways to read something depending on what your purpose is. So you can very quickly skim to get the gist of something. You can scan if you're looking for specific information, like that bus schedule or a telephone book. Skimming, I often skim a magazine or travel brochures or a newspaper when I'm in a doctor's office. Extensive reading is different. Extensive reading is when you need to read the whole thing to understand it. So obviously you would, if you were reading a novel for pleasure, you would want to read the whole thing. Same thing with poems or a chapter in a textbook. That would definitely require extensive reading. Now, intensive reading is like a short burst of reading for detail or extracting specific information. I do this a lot when I read a recipe because I'm very precise about my recipes. So I want to make sure that I understand exactly what needs to happen when so that my recipe comes out perfectly. It can also be used as you are revising your own writing. If I'm looking at an essay that I'm trying to write, I'm going to be reading that very intensively and looking for very specific information and checking out how things flow and if this makes sense and if I like the way that this detail connects with the rest of it. So that kind of intensive reading is definitely required when you're revising your writing, as well as if you might be doing research. Like if you're reading a research article for a paper, that will also require intensive reading, and you will get an opportunity to do that later in the semester. And the last kind of reading isn't something that most people talk about often, a lot of times, but in academic reading, it definitely comes into play here. It's called syntopic reading, and this is when you read several books to gain a broader understanding of a specific topic or an issue, and you want to get lots of different perspectives on the issue or the topic at hand. And again, you will be getting a chance to do this when we do our position paper at the end of this course. And this kind of reading is important if you are preparing a literature review, which it would be part of writing a thesis, as you are researching evidence to support your position paper, or even if you're preparing for a presentation on a specific topic that you're going to share with other nurses on the floor or other people in your profession. You are going to want to be doing that kind of syntopical reading where you kind of become an expert on all of the different ideas and thoughts that are out there on a specific topic. Okay, so the most important thing to remember about reading is that reading is a dynamic, interactive process between you and the author. Now, you are reading the author's message, so you are creating meaning from the author's message based on your knowledge and your experiences and your beliefs about the world. For example, when I was teaching reading, one of my students was reading a book about the circus. She was a first grader, but we had a problem. She had never been to the circus. She'd never heard of the circus. She'd never read anything about a circus before. So do you think it was easy for her to understand that book? No, because everything was new for her. First, she had to learn the word circus. Then she had to learn the words ringmaster and tightrope and acrobat and trapeze, and I quickly abandoned ship when I realized how difficult this task was for her because she had no background knowledge to draw on or bring to the reading situation. So, your background knowledge and what you think about the author's message is an important part of the conversation between you and the author, and that's what reading is all about. It's a dialogue between you and the author. I know a lot of my students, I feel like sometimes they think that they just, if they roll their eyeballs over the page, they call that reading. But it's not. It's not. You have to be engaged in what you are reading. Okay, we're going to talk about the process of reading critically. And here's a flow chart of what good readers do before, during, and after reading. So if you look at the before section, the most important thing to do is to realize, why am I reading this? Do you have a specific question that you want to have answered? Are you looking for something for your research paper? Are you trying to pass a test? Are you reading that recipe to get it to make that perfect birthday cake? You have to know why you are reading before you can read critically. The second thing that I encourage everyone to do is think about what you know, because again, that's half of the equation. What you already know about the situation is vital to understanding that text. Just like my little girl who didn't know what a circus was. She had nothing to bring. So make sure that you bring what you know. And the third thing is to pre-read. Skim, look at the visual aids that are in the book. Think about the text structure. Like if you got your textbook and you're looking at it for the first time, go through and look at it because there are 4 parts to our textbook. There's actually 4 books in one, and there are 4 different sections that we're going to be using as we go through the course. So familiarize yourself with how the text is set up. Okay, so that's the before part. Now, if we think about the during, when we're actually reading, there are some things that I'm going to ask you to try doing. One of the things that I'm going to encourage you to try after reading chapter 2 is I want you to try doing some annotations. Take some notes. Get yourself interacting with the book. Again, it's not just rolling your eyeballs over the page. What do you think about what you're reading? Make predictions about what you think might happen next, or what you think, where you think the author might be going with something. And think about the connections. How does this connect with what you already know about the situation? So one of the things that I like to encourage my students to remember is that there are 3 different types of connections that you can make. You can connect the text to another text that you've read. You can connect the text to something else that you have heard or seen or experienced. And you can also connect the text to yourself. The other thing that I encourage my students to do is monitor and ask yourself, do I understand this? Am I getting this? And if not, then clarify. Are there ideas that I don't understand? Are there words that I don't understand? It's important to go back and clarify what you don't understand. And another tip that I like to tell people is to make a video in your head. A lot of us are very visual people, and if we can make a picture or pictures in our head as we read, that can be a very powerful way to help us remember and think about exactly what the author is trying to say and what we think about it. Okay, as we move into the after reading category, of course, you're going to want to reevaluate. Did I meet my purpose? Did I get my question answered? Did I understand what I read? Are there parts that I need to go back and reread? And then another thing that we're going to be talking about in depth is how to write about what you've read. So can you summarize what you've read? How might you analyze or look critically at what you read and evaluate what you think the author is saying, but also, do you think that what the author is saying is true or valid? Are they making a valid point, or do you not agree with what they're saying, or do you think that they're missing some evidence? That kind of evaluation is critical as you read. And another thing, especially as you read information from your profession, you're going to want to think about how you can apply what you've learned. And evidence-based practice is a very important part of what nurses do. You have to link current research with what you're actually doing in the field. So that application piece after you read is important. Okay. I also want to remind you that reading and writing, they're basically 2 sides of the same coin. When you write, you're expressing meaning through symbols. When you read, you're creating meaning from those symbols. The writer uses rhetorical forms to structure their writing. Readers, as they read, use what they know about different text structures and genres to understand what they're reading. For instance, I'm going to read a fairy tale in a very different way than how I might read an argumentative essay. The author is sending a message to the reader. The reader is interpreting that author's message based on what the reader knows, thinks, and feels. The writer is attempting to usually answer a question, or they have a focus, and the reader is usually reading for a purpose or attempts to get a question answered. Sometimes a writer is seeking to persuade the audience to do something specific, and a reader is going to be evaluating the writer to see, well, do I really believe what that writer is saying? Am I going to let the author persuade me into into believing that what they're saying is credible? Um, Also, writers and readers learn from collaboration. Good writers use what they learn from peer review to help them become better writers. And readers discuss what they read with other readers to gain a broader understanding of what they've read, as well as thinking about the broader implications of that. So, as you read chapter 2, please think about what connections do you see between how you read and how you write? Um, are there strategies that you already are using before you read, during you read, and after you're reading? Um, and think about some new reading techniques that you might like to try. One of your assignments is going to be focusing on annotating and summarizing and doing some critical analysis of what you read in the form of a rhetorical précis. Um, don't let the name fool you. It's actually a very simple process that they outline for you in the text. But if you hear me referring to a rhetorical précis, it's basically summarizing, analyzing, and critiquing a particular piece of text. So that's it. You're ready now to read chapter 2 and dive in, and I hope that you learned a thing or two about how to become a better reader.